Hello everyone, welcome to another installment of Economics with Tully. And even though this particular video is meant very specifically for sports economics, you're going to find that I'm actually going to talk very little about sports in particular in this video. In order to understand the relationship that the teams have with the leagues, and in order to understand the differences between leagues such as the MLS and the NFL and Major League Baseball, it really becomes necessary to look at how those relationships between the teams and the leagues are structured. Now, in a general business course, you'd probably hear the instructor, in fact, you'd probably hear me, talk about the difference between a sole proprietorship, a partnership, and a corporation. And then maybe the differences between a private and a public corporation. And then there are some interesting little variations called LLCs. We're not going to look at those, but instead we're going to look at the three ways of organizing a large business that are peculiarly important to sports. Now, anyone who has followed sports for a while knows that we have simply become very used to referring to the teams as franchises of the leagues, and that's become a very common way to refer to them. And there's nothing wrong with referring to them as franchises. And I think if you refer to them as anything else, people would look at you odd. However, from an economic perspective, from a legal perspective, there are big differences between exactly how those leagues are structured. And the best way to understand those differences are to look at some of the different corporate models that exist when you have a large organization and local units. And then in the future weeks, what we will do is look at each league one at a time to see how they fit into these structures. And I think probably one of the best examples of why this is important has just fairly recently happened, and that was when there was a lot of media attention and a lot of discussion about whether or not the NBA could force Donald Sterling to sell his interest in the Clippers. Well, that legal question goes to the heart of what we're talking today, and that is that legal corporate structure between the league and the franchises. So what I'd like to do, and this will be a brief video, is look at the differences between the three major corporate ways of organizing. Again, when you have a very large structure and you have individual units. One of the most common forms within a corporate structure is to simply have a corporate chain. And by a corporate chain, I mean that a large corporation simply owns all of its individual stores. So perhaps the corporation is headquartered, and I'll just make this up, perhaps the corporation is headquartered in Minneapolis, and they have thousands of stores selling whatever it is they sell across the United States. A corporate structure, a traditional corporate structure, is a top-down structure. And that means that the corporation, headquartered in Minneapolis, owns all of those specific stores. Chances are that the employees of those stores get their paychecks from a central payroll office in Minneapolis. At the end of the year, when you get your tax statement in the mail and you work for one of these corporations, you look at the return address and you say, what the heck is this? I never heard of this place or this office. And that's because it's the corporate office that has a payroll office that sends out the W-2s to all of the employees. The corporate office at the top has the full right to decide when to open stores, where to open stores, when to close stores. They hire and fire the managers all the way down the line. They have HR rules and regulations for their employees, for their uniforms, they have a code of conduct. In other words, it's a very top-down organization, and those at the very top have the ultimate legal say as to how to actually operate each of the individual units right down to the very local retail level. That's a corporate chain model, and that's very much one extreme. Again, that's very top-heavy. Moving to a more shared relationship between the folk at the top and the people on the local level is very often called a franchise model. And a franchise model is more of a shared relationship between those two levels. What will happen is, and many companies with which you are familiar actually operate as franchise. A lot of income tax preparation firms are franchises. Car rental firms are franchises. Many fast food corporations use a franchise model. And what that means is that at the local level, the small business, the one that you usually have your interaction with, they actually are incorporated as a separate business. They are a separate business apart from the parent corporation. But they enter into a relationship with the parent corporation. And the name we give these relationships are the franchisor. So McDonald's Corporation is the franchisor. And the local unit is the franchisee. Now, the franchisee, as I said, is its own corporation. It has its own owner, its own company. In order to be a franchisee, you actually have to incorporate locally. You will end up paying your own taxes. You pay a fee to the parent corporation, the franchisor, in order to use their name. So if you just wanted to open a restaurant somewhere, one of the initial problems you'd have is that someone who didn't know you or didn't know your restaurant and was just driving down the street and saw it, they would have no idea what to expect on the inside. You know, is this a high quality, high price steakhouse that's going to take us an hour and a half to get out of with wait staff service? Or is this a real cheap run in, grab a burger and run out? Well, if you're trying to do this on your own, people who don't know you wouldn't have that information. But if you say, I'm going to open up a McDonald's franchise or a Wendy's franchise, people know immediately what to expect when they pull in to your business, even though they've never been to your business before. And that's because when the franchisee buys the license to operate this way from the franchisor, there are certain rules that go along with that. They've got to use the products that are created by the franchisor. You can't have your local McDonald's decide that they're only going to sell fresh oysters and clams in the half shell at an open clam bar, because that's not what McDonald's does. You have to use their suppliers, their products, their pricing system. They may have rules about what the employees are supposed to wear. They may have rules about what hours you have to be open. They give you a lot of rules as to how you can operate your particular business. And the trade-off here is that you have to do things their way, but it's your corporation and you get immediate benefit from the public knowing who you are and what you're doing. The franchisor will spend millions of dollars on advertising, on sending coupons out, on taking out ads on national televised events, all of which benefits you. So you get all of this support from the corporate office, all of this marketing from the corporate office, and a lot of the decisions you don't even have to make because they're made for you. Here's who supplies your burgers. Here's who supplies your drinks. here's how we organize a store, and they'll provide marketing information about your community and whether it's an appropriate place for your particular franchise or not. So it's a trade-off. You get a lot of support from that corporate office, but you have to do things their way. But it's your corporation, and you will end up paying taxes just like you would for any corporation in your state. And at the end of the year, you have to send, or maybe during the year, you have to send a certain percent of your profit to the home office. So you're buying a license to use their name, their goodwill, and their marketing in your particular business. It's a shared relationship. And it's very possible that a particular franchisee may decide, I'm closing down my store, I'm going out of business. That's why sometimes some of you may be familiar with a small number of stores within a chain will close down. And you'll wonder about that. How come the 6 McDonald's in our region of the state all closed up? Well, that might have to do with the fact that the franchisee, the owner of those 6 stores, actually went bankrupt. That doesn't bankrupt all of McDonald's, all of the parent corporation. It just bankrupts him and his operation. So that would be a shared franchise model. That is the model that we often think of in terms of the sports world, where the league allows the individual team to piggyback on their marketing, on the fact that the public knows what to expect and what the rules are of the game and what the schedules are going to be, and when they go to a stadium, what they're actually going to see. The logo is often, if not always, coming from from a main office, that MLB logo, the NFL logo. So that's why we've come to see the relationship between the teams and the parent corp, or the league, as a franchise. And that's an appropriate way to look at it. But not all 5 leagues operate, excuse me, specifically that way. At the other end of the spectrum, so you've got that corporate top-down approach, the corporate chain model. Then you've got the shared model of the franchise. But then there's another extreme off at the other side. And the extreme at the other side is something called a Producers Cooperative. Now, you may have heard the word a co-op or a cooperative. And there's many, many cooperatives, even in this area of GCC where I'm teaching from. And the word cooperative is very unfortunately used to mean a great many different things. So it's very confusing to people when they hear that something is a cooperative. It's very confusing to know exactly what it is that they mean. There are consumer cooperatives, and that means the people who actually buy the product own the business. And it's very common to see that in something like a health food store, let's say, where people become members of the cooperative and they work, they put in some time working, and they get a discount for the products that they buy, and the workers are the owners. That's not what we're talking about. That's a consumer cooperative. Other times you'll see a cooperative of, let's say, artists or artisans, where 7 or 8 people who create art. Maybe it's blown glass, maybe it's silk tie-dyed scarves, maybe it's painting, maybe it's jewelry. None of them have enough capital to open up their own storefront on the street and pay rent and pay employees and incur all the expenses that a normal storefront would incur. And maybe they don't have enough stock to fill the store either. So they get together, and of course those are producers because they're making the good. They get together and they decide to share the space. And then maybe on Mondays and Fridays, the person who does the glass blowing will actually be the staff in the store, working the cash register and cleaning the place and interacting with customers. And maybe on Tuesdays, the person who does the jewelry will do the same. And so they share all the expenses. Those are very, very common forms of cooperatives. But that is also not the kind of cooperative I'm talking about. The kind of cooperative that is most applicable to what we're looking at in the sports world would be something like Ocean Spray Cranberries. Now, you may think of Ocean Spray Cranberry as just this enormous corporation that sells cranberry juice and cranberries in a bag at Thanksgiving. But that corporation is actually formed as a producer cooperative. And what that means is it is a bottom-up organization. At the current time, there are more than 300 different growers of cranberries in the United States, most in Wisconsin, New Jersey, and Massachusetts. And those individual farmers own their own farms free and clear. They call the shots on how to run that farm, on how to hire, on what to pay their members, on what their work hours are going to be, on if there's going to be a uniform, and I doubt there's uniforms if you're actually working in a cranberry bog. They have to they decide where they're getting their supplies from, and if they're using an herbicide or a fungicide, they decide where that's coming from. It is their business, and what they do is they've gotten together as a group, and normally, if you have 5 or 6 cranberry farmers, or farmers in for any product, they'd be in competition with each other. When you go to a farmer's market, let's say, and you go to 6 or 7 different stalls in a row, and every one of them is selling tomatoes, they are technically in competition with each other. That's the norm. So what they do is they form a cooperative, and they say, hey, instead of being in competition with each other, let's pool all of our products together and act with one voice. And this is how Ocean Spray started a number of years ago with only 3 growers. They took all their harvest, their cranberries, together, and they said, we're going to speak with one voice, and we're going to form Ocean Spray Cranberries as a corporation. And all of our cranberries go to that corporation, and then the corporation decides, here's the price that we're marketing all of our cranberries for. And here's how we're selling it to this fruit juice company, or this breakfast cereal company, or this dried fruit and nut company. And so it takes many, many different producers and gives them a single voice. And instead of competing with each other, they now say, look, we've got lots more product, and we want this price for our product, and that's who we are. So Ocean Spray grew from 3 to over 300 cranberry growers doing this. And by doing this, by forming the Ocean Spray Corporation, which is the top piece of their structure, that corporation engages in marketing, which helps them all, and it engages in those contracts with the cereal companies and the fruit and nut companies that helps them all. But that top corporation is owned by the individual farmers who come together and vote for its directors and make sure that their wishes are carried out by the corporation. So in many ways, it looks like the corporate top-down model, except instead of the corporation at the top telling the individual units and stores what to do, the cooperative members at the bottom get together and tell the corporation that they own at the top what the corporation needs to do to serve them. So now you have 3 different models to look at. 1, the top-down corporate chain. 2, the shared relationship of the franchise, which is what we usually refer to in sports. But then we also have the bottom-up producer cooperative. Now, the reason I'm going through all this is I'm going to suggest to you that even though we call all of the leagues a franchise-type operation, and even though they will refer to themselves as a franchise-type operation, at least one of the major 5 leagues, at least one of them, personally, I think acts more like a corporate top-down model. And at least one of them operates more like a producer cooperative bottom-up model. And the remaining 3 leagues, well, maybe they operate like pure franchises, maybe they lean a little bit one way or another. What we're going to do over the next several weeks of this course is examine league by league by league to look at which of these 3 models does this league really look like. Why is this important? It's important when we look at the issue of revenue sharing, which is the amount of money that teams must forward to the corporate headquarters. It comes into play when a league wants to expand the number of teams in the league or contract the number of teams in the league. It comes into play when the various owners want to get rid of an owner of one of the teams, as I mentioned in the Donald Sterling situation. It comes into play with what money stay home with the team and what gets sent. There's a lot of ramifications. It affects where the paychecks come from and who decides what the player salary levels might be, and how contracts are negotiated between the union and the league or the team owner. So this may sound like highfalutin legal stuff, but the reality is how these teams and leagues are structured have a lot of an effect on how it plays out in public, and how come the Major League Soccer just recently bought the team Chivas USA from the owner and took it back? How come the Montreal Expos were allowed to move to Washington, D.C., and what did they have to do in order to make that happen? How come a franchise in soccer is just awarded to Orlando, or in second one to New York City, which has recently happened? How come there was so much media debate over whether Donald Sterling could be let go as an owner of the Clippers or not? All of this goes back to this question of structure. And so if we get an understanding of structure under our belt, and then look at team operations through that prism, a lot of their operations and a lot of what they do and how they do it becomes more understandable. So that's what this week's lesson is about, and I'll provide readings that are a little more specific for you, and get an understanding of that, and the next month or more of this course is going to make a lot more sense. All right? That's Tom Simmons signing off for Sports Economics.